And welcome back into another new episode of Tribal Council Chat. This time, a brand new episode recap, the premiere episode of Survivor 46. As always, we're your hosts. My name is Bruce Heller,
My name's Brett Parnell.
and let's dive in. So, going back to the way we did these recaps last season, before we dive into the episode itself, we are going to share our player of the week. And this time we are recording right after the episode finished. So this will be off the top of my head. So who is your player of the week?
That's a good question. I'm
Uh-huh.
just kind of reviewing it. I mean, we're still so early in the season. I'm going to say my player of the week, and this is probably going to give it away in terms of the result, but is Q.
That's what I was gonna say too, honestly, and I'm not just saying that because you picked him, but he knew what he wanted. He saw
Yeah.
the plan going a certain direction other than the target he wanted. Talked to people, performed great at tribal, and got what he wanted and got Jelinski sent home.
That's exactly kind of my rationale behind it is we don't see a lot, say, of the two other tribes to really have an idea what's going on. In contrast, he really played the social game tonight and looks to be in a great position. And not only that, but people who were seemingly with Jelinski going into the vote, like Kinsey and Tiffany, voted with him.
Yeah, and couple things. First off, we'll get to this when we get to tribal council. Q was fantastic at tribal, at
Yeah.
putting the target squarely on Jelinski and taking it off of Jess a little bit. But also, and I'll rehash this whole spiel when we get there probably. Kenzie has a quote going into tribal of, I just don't know which way to go. She's feeling very conflicted. And then says something about rule number one of Survivor is don't quit. That's why this shouldn't be a hard vote. Like, why are you conflicted? And then you're going to say the first rule is don't quit. He just did that twice. This shouldn't be hard.
Yeah, I guess you're absolutely right. I can see why she's conflicted to a point because with some of the way Jess was, I almost wondered if we were about to see her quit in the middle of the show.
I was going to be so upset if we had a second straight season that started off with
Exactly.
somebody quitting.
So I'm sure that's probably where she was coming from. But yeah, you're right. He did quit. He especially with the Shipwheel Island or whatever Journey Island, I guess it's probably called now.
Yeah.
Because that one he could win. I can see giving up in the like sweat challenge because you can simply do the math and figure out are we like 20% of the way done with two a half our time done? We're not gonna win it. But
Yeah. If you're even if you know you're not going to win it though, it's a bad look to me just to the rest of the tribe to say I quit. I didn't even try to do my best and finish it. Especially when you have multiple hours left and you're doing it because you think several means seven. I I gotta say, and starting in the end of 45, beginning of the off season, I've kind of been on the Zane Knight as my favorite first boot train because he was incredibly entertaining. I
yeah,
think I have a new winner for the second most entertaining first boot. Zane is still the top for sure. But man, Jelensky brought some entertainment and some face palms here
he did.
in a way that we haven't probably seen since Zane from a first boot. So let's dive in to the recap chronologically. This opening challenge, it's we see another new variation of how to do sweat versus savvy. So the first
Yeah.
tribe wins their camp supplies, pot and a machete. Second tribe gets to choose whether they do sweat for or savvy, and the third place gets what's left. And I like this. This is a new way of doing
I like
this.
it too.
So we've now
And it
seen,
also is better for TV because we get to see both tribes figure out a different challenge as opposed to seeing two of them do the exact same thing one after the next.
yeah, and so the three ways we've seen this done now is the original way, 41 through I believe 44, was all three tribes had the same choice at their own camp. It wasn't tied to the challenge. You can either do this or this, and it was the same two choices for all of them. 45 did it where two of them, and that's where they started tying it to the challenge. Two of them went off to, I guess, Advantage Island. There's not a ship wheel anymore.
Yeah.
And one of them got to choose, and the other one got what was left, I believe. And so they're kind of doing it the same that they did last season, but they're tying it to the challenge even more, which is kind of interesting. And so the first note I have from this challenge is they learned from 44. The part where you're crawling through the mud is under a net this time, not with something hard above their head that someone could hit their head on.
Yes, exactly.
I don't
Very
know.
smart.
I was the
I
only
mean,
person that had that thought, but
and then you don't have to worry about what if somebody hits their head and therefore wants a spot on the next season.
yeah. To be fair, I don't know if he asked for that spot or Probst just gave it to him, but I'm glad they brought
Who
him back. He
knows?
was fun.
Oh yeah, so was I.
What did you think of this challenge, though?
Interesting. The one thing I'm confused about, and I'm curious to know your take, Bruce, is Jeff's line at the beginning saying one of you can't win.
Oh, I skipped over that in my notes. I went straight to the
I
challenge. I
was
have this.
he
Let
was
me
in
read.
it. It was good for the challenge, and I guess I understand his logic of like there's always somebody who gets to the end that can't win. We've seen that
Yeah,
since pretty much the whole new school, let alone new era. That being said, I was just like, he's not going with this where he might be going, right? We're not just going to send somebody home randomly right now.
it just felt very weird and out of place. And by the
Mhm.
way, as far as somebody making it to the end that can't win, that goes all the way back to old school. That goes back to 19 with Russell, I'd say.
Exactly.
I would say 8, but the jury really didn't like Rob or Amber, so Rob still had a chance to
Rob
win.
got
He
three
came up a
votes.
vote short, but if Rob had been against almost anyone else, he has no shot there.
Yeah.
But we don't need to get sidetracked into All Stars. We do that enough every single other time we record, except for last week. But the note I have written down about this, and I'll read it straight off my phone. What's with Probst's opening monologue? Quote, there's at least one of you here that simply can't win no matter who you go to the end with or what you do. Like, why? This just feels very weird. He's normally so like
See,
upbeat and hopeful at the beginning of the season, and he's coming in all doom and gloom this time.
it necessarily means anything. I think, however, he said it was just either, and like I've seen politicians do this, either Probst was just speaking off the cuff in a situation that was totally not re-recorded, or whoever wrote that for him was just did a really bad job.
Yeah, it just felt weird. It felt very doom and gloom for some reason when he's normally
Yeah.
very like upbeat and hopeful at the marooning. But and so they go through this challenge and basically they have to crawl under a net through mud, grab heavy puzzle pieces, and bring them back. And then once they have them all, they must assemble this puzzle that Probst calls it a three-level podium. It's basically stairs. I don't know why we're calling it a podium, but forms the stairs. They go up it, grab a key. First team to do that wins. And Nami wins the orange team. And so,
Let's talk about something during the challenge, though,
yeah.
before we get to the end result. Hunter telling Venus to stay back and make the hole really big for the rest of the tribe. That was so smart.
Yeah, and I will say they win and finish
He had
way.
time to then, after he dropped his piece off, go back and help her. But by that point, she already removed all of the sand, and her tribe mates could just go and go and go.
Oh yeah, it was brilliant, and that's
Yeah.
why they finished way before the other two. So good for Hunter. I believe Hunter's on my tribe. And another thing I wanted to note, sort of during the challenge for the other two, but after Nami had already won, is and I forget who it was. Someone from Yanu, the purple team, was now I'm second guessing myself because I didn't write it down. I don't remember if they were from purple or Siga, which was the green team. But somebody ran over and looked at Nami's puzzle. And
It
like
was purple. It was Zelensky.
it was Joanne's okay, so he the one smart thing he did goes over
Yep.
and looks at how theirs is put together and notices there's this seal on the front of it. Not soon enough because Siga still finishes before them, but that was a
We're
smart move.
just too far behind.
Yeah, you see that with the challenge sometimes with like individual challenges. That's why a lot of them, like if they have a board or something, they'll mess it up before they move on to the next thing, like in a final or something. So seeing him go examine Nami's winning puzzle was, I thought, a good move, but just too little too late. So, do you have any other thoughts from this opening challenge?
Not really. Just that we see, if I grab the tribe names, I'm always bad at that for a couple of weeks. But we clearly have, as I wrote down here, Nami. I put down Nami as like the Luvu Otaku of this season. It's already visible.
Yeah, and this comes up later in my notes, but we see Siga call themselves and act, it plays out as the Vibes Tribe. And Nami is kind of like the team spirit tribe because we have a couple scenes of them like clapping and cheering each other for everything they do. And I put Yanu is dot dot dot, and I still don't know the answer to what like what their Yanu's identity as a tribe is, but I'm looking forward to seeing it. And I love the other two tribes. Like they're both awesome.
To laugh when I had to laugh when you said the Vibes Tribe, because I'm not sure if you were on Twitter or not during the episode,
Off and
but
on.
Michelle says we need a Vibes counter in the bottom corner of the screen.
Nice. Is that talking about the challenge reunion, I assume, or was that talking about Survivor?
She was watching Survivor.
Okay, I wasn't sure what she'd be watching because her challenge reunion was on at the same time, I think. But yeah. And also, well, we'll go in order. So the first scene we cut to after the challenge is at Yanu at camp. And the note I have here is we get a scene of Jelensky right off the bat of him saying, I'm from Vegas. There's no trees in Vegas, at least not any good ones, which I don't know what good trees means. But anyway,
As someone who's been to Vegas quite a few times, I think what he means that only a like person who's been there would notice is that a lot of the casinos have fake trees for like
okay, so
aesthetics.
real trees would have been a better word than good trees, but
Would have
okay.
been, yeah, but like the Mandalay Bay imports palm trees from Hawaii to be part of the aesthetic.
And then in this same little scene from him, he goes, Jeff always talks about the monster of Survivor. Jelensky is the monster. And that's an exact quote. And I just wrote down,
Yeah,
like,
that was
this first
not
little
well said.
bit, this first little bit we see of Jelensky is exactly what I expected from him. Well, I believe when we first did the cast breakdown, I said I didn't know what to expect from him exactly, but this was pretty much what was in my head. And at this point in the episode, I was here for it. It grew old quickly, but And then this next note, because this is someone you and me were both interested in our draft. Bondu is just a breath of fresh air so far. Like I love that guy. I'm happy he's on my team.
Yeah, so do I. And shout out to him too in the vote. I'm sure we'll talk about it later, but he played a big role in that too and really got what he wanted out of
Yeah.
the result. So looks to be in a strong spot.
And I think we both determined he would be pretty strong from the EW article of the cast release because I took him with my first pick, but I feel like if I hadn't, you would have taken him with your first pick. So because we like he was near the top of the list for both of us. He's gonna be awesome.
Yeah, he
And
will be.
and the next note, my last note from this section at Yanu camp is that Jelensky and Q step up to do savvy sweat.
Yeah.
And we may have done this last season, I don't remember, but I personally, if I'm on a tribe that's doing sweat or savvy, I'm not going to be the person that steps up and volunteers quickly like Jelensky does there. And Q a little bit, but not as quickly. Because, and I wrote this down in the Sega section, but I'm going to say it now because we're here. The thing with sweat versus savvy is the downsides of failing to me far outweigh the benefits of being the one that completes it.
Okay.
Like, would you want to do sweat or savvy for your tribe?
Um, no, but I don't think I'd be very good at either one of them. So it just puts you in a bad position if you don't succeed.
Exactly. And I mean, if you do
And
succeed, cool, but that's
yeah,
going to be
you get a
forgotten.
pottery loop, but it's like it's kind of high risk and low reward, if you ask me.
Exactly. Because if you fail, you're the reason your tribe doesn't have this stuff. If you succeed, cool, your tribe has the stuff. The fact that you're the reason why will be forgotten in a day or two at the most.
Exactly. And it's not like you can't survive without them either.
And so, yeah. And this kind of,
When you look at what you get, okay, a machete will help you build the shelter, but you can sleep on the beach. A pot will help you transport water, but after the Caleb incident in Korong, it's not like the well water is undrinkable.
yeah.
You're good.
And so this is kind of an easy segue into our move over to Sega camp for the first time, where they're doing Savvy. And I said Jelensky volunteered quickly. Charlie and Ben volunteer even quicker than the people from Yanu did to do Sweat. Those two stepped up so quickly for some reason.
Yeah.
But I mean, I like the two of them. Like they seem really fun together watching them attempt Savvy, even though they fail. But
It was interesting. I'm not surprised they failed. I don't think it means that either one is necessarily gonna be bad at puzzles. I think they just thought it was a mathematical approach and not a like hidden words approach, and therefore was so off mark that there was no chance.
yeah, I agree. And you know what? And I have this written down, but we're here. We're talking about Ben. He went last in our draft. He went the 18th pick overall. Neither one of the two of us or Kevin, who joined us, seemed very impressed with his preseason stuff. He seems like he's the life of the party on this tribe so far. Like people seem to like him. And
He's impressing me so far in a ways that his interview didn't. So that's always nice to see.
yeah, and we'll have more on him later when we get to that part. But the next part that's interesting here, as Sweat versus Savvy is happening, we see Maria and Tim bonding over being parents. And in the confessional following this, we get back to back quotes from Maria that I felt the need to write down. Because she said, we bonded over being parents, but I don't want to be anyone's mom out here, which makes sense after because the mom figure usually becomes a
I
target.
mean, congratulations to Julie last season on a great season, but you're more often than not going to end up like Reem.
Yeah, well, even Julie was targeted, and her name was out there just because she was the mom of the tribe. But the next quote is also interesting. I'm not going to be the one in the flashy red car. I'm going to be in my minivan driving to the game, which I assume is her way of saying she wants to play under the radar and not be seen as like leading anything or be the one people see. But that was an interesting way of phrasing that.
Yeah, it was.
I do think she's playing really well so far though.
Yeah. We'll see how that quote kind of shows us how her character is going to develop in future episodes. It's hard to say how it'll play out.
Yeah, for sure. And so after we see this scene, we see Ben and Charlie fail Savvy, but as we talked about, neither one of us seem to think that'll affect the two of them long term. And as we'll get to later, Charlie already is in the middle and has two groups of people forming that both want him, so he's fine. So they fail and see this. And before we move to Nami, do you have anything from this first segment of Siga's camp?
Seaga's green, right?
Yeah, that's the one we're on right now.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I'm not mixing up the tribe names and colors. I just wanted to say one thing I had written down, kind of a side note. People, I'm not going to get into details. People can go to my Twitter if they want to know why. But if there is a Taylor Swift fan and a Kanye West fan, I'm cheering for the Taylor Swift fan. So I like my pick of Charlie so far.
Yeah, they seem to get along pretty well though, like Tim and Charlie. And again, Ben was the one in the middle of that being like, "Oh, what song would you put on a mixtape? What song would you put on a mixtape?" Like I mean, they call themselves the Vibe Tribe, so this feels a little redundant, but Ben himself just seems like he is a vibe this first episode. Like I don't know what to do with him, but I'm here for it.
We'll see how it plays out.
Yeah. And we move to Nami, and the first thing we see from Nami is like they're all like in the water bonding as a tribe, typical stuff. And Liz makes an interesting move here. She goes, "Oh, I've owned four companies. I sold two of them for a lot of money, but I still own the other two. I'm pretty
She never
awesome."
she never really said for a lot though. It was presumed that she sold them for a lot by her
That
tribe mates,
that's
right?
fair. I mean, that's them just presuming that. I shouldn't have quoted her that way, but I also feel like that's a fair
It's
assumption.
fine. It's just I have a note here where let me just find it. Where I said Liz may have made herself a target by accident.
Oh, she absolutely did. And I will fix my quote. She just said, "I've owned four companies. I sold two of them." Actually says the line herself, "I'm pretty awesome." And when I hear that, what I wrote down is, "This is a bad move. You're making yourself a target." And then, as I was typing, Tevin says she's flaunting her dollar bills when people came out here to get money. And I think she forgot the game starts today and not tomorrow. So she absolutely made herself a target. At least she's on Tevin's radar.
It's it's a big mistake whether Tevin's right that she's rich or whether she sold them because they were about to go out of business. We don't know, but
Yep, but still, like, and just even saying the quote, "I'm pretty awesome." This early in the game, I feel like the best thing is just you don't want your name out there because the first vote or two is just whatever name comes out there that people can agree on. I'd be trying to keep attention off of myself. And here's Liz. Oh, here's how great I am. Not a great move.
yeah. But I mean, one of the most famous survival confessionals ever, just to play devil's advocate here, I don't disagree with you at all. But is Richard Hatch saying in 10 minutes into the episode, I have the $1 million check already?
Yes, but he's saying that in a confessional, not to the other contestants.
Yeah, true.
And once the game gets on, like once you get to late pre-merge and then merge forward, yes, you want, like, for the sake of the jury and those you're playing with, you want it to, you don't want to to just be unknown, because then you get to the end and nobody knows what you did. But this early in the game, people are just going to vote for whatever name people can agree on. You don't just keep attention off of yourself, is how I see it. But, and also shout out to Tevin, because I was on Twitter during this, and Tevin had a great episode. And Steven, who's been on our podcasts for our jury questions episode, hopefully will be back on sometime, tweeted that he was, I believe he phrased it, living for Tevin at some point in the episode. So shout out to Steven if he listens to this. But Kevin was great this episode. I love him so far.
Yeah.
And then I don't, this must have been a pretty quick scene at Nami camp, because I don't have any other notes from this section. Do you have anything before we go back to Yanu?
Um, early in this section, no.
So we go back to Yanu, and we mentioned that Jelensky quit two different things. This is the first time, because he and Q are working on Sweat, and it admittedly looks like they're not going to be able to get it done in the time frame. And but Jelensky says, we have this much left to go. We have this many hours left, which was a couple of hours, by the way. And that's kind of my problem with it. We should just quit. And I'm kind of surprised, based on the way he acts in his confessional here. I'm kind of surprised Q went along with it and didn't at least try to say, no, let's finish this and see, at least try. But they quit. And I wrote, Jelensky decides they should quit the sweat challenge. Bad move. Makes you look like a quitter to the rest of the tribe and makes it look like you're someone they can't rely on. And Q
It's
even has a
one good thing
confessional.
from Q's perspective of not trying to push him the other way is exactly what you just said. Jelinski now looks like a quitter and has put a target on himself in a tribe of six.
Yeah, and Q even says while they're quitting in a confessional, now I know that Jelensky is someone that when the tough gets going, he quits. And so I even put, like, at least Ben and Charlie kept trying until the time ran out. Like, they failed also, but they they put their best effort forward. They didn't just say, "Oh, I won't be able to finish this. I'm done." So, and to everyone on social media, because I did check Twitter a few times, that put a picture of Hannah from 45 who quit in the first episode and said Jelensky during the sweat challenge, and it was a picture of Hannah. Shout out to you guys. That made me laugh.
Still making waves on the Survivor premiere 6 months after she quit.
Oh, that's gonna make waves forever. Like, when you quit, you'll always be remembered. Except for Julie McGee from San Juan del Sur, who seems to get talked about a lot less than any other quitter. Oh, her and the girl from Kagion that quit too. She doesn't get talked about almost at all either.
Lindsay.
Yeah, but quits will, you get remembered if you quit. Like, even those two still are remembered because they quit. They just don't get talked about a ton. But yeah, Hannah's never going to
Absolutely.
escape this. Not with how the internet is now. And so we moved back to Sega camp, and this is really interesting because you and me both said earlier we wouldn't want to do Sweat versus Savvy because of how it could go over with your tribe if you fail. Sega doesn't seem to be upset at all that Charlie and Ben failed. They seem to take it pretty well. And it's not even like they act nice to them, then in a confessional say, oh, I can't believe they failed us here. They just genuinely seem to not be upset about it.
Exactly. I mean, I good that that happens. If it was me and two people step forward on something like that and they didn't succeed, I mean, you can't really fault them. There's so much more in this game than just Sweat versus Savvy. You'll get a pot eventually.
Yeah, for sure. Like I personally wouldn't be that upset about it, but we've seen it a lot since Sweat versus Savvy was introduced that
Exactly.
people get annoyed about it. And so here's where we get into a little bit more of the Ben stuff I mentioned earlier. Because in a confessional, we see Tim call Ben the quote, Dean of Cultural Vibes, which made me laugh. That's a great title. And then we get this montage of Ben scenes of him just talking and talking to different people and just seemingly nonstop. And we've seen that a few times in Survivor, where it's meant to push that that person is annoying the tribe, like with Sugar and annoying Colby in Heroes versus Villains. There have been others that just. So I'm watching this montage thinking, oh, Ben's annoying everyone. But no, they all love him. He's the life of the party of this tribe. And I did not see that coming. So good for the editors, kind of tricking us a
I
little
didn't
bit.
either, but I like it.
Were you thinking that watching that scene too?
Same as me.
Yeah, I was thinking that was going to be he's annoying everyone, but no, it's oh, we all love Ben, even though he seems to be there's an alliance that I think is forming that he seems to be on the outside of, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and also from Sega, Mariah seems to bond really quickly with Jem and Maria, and I like this trio. And
Oh,
she's Kevin's winner pick, but I really like Jem so far. She seems like a really
so do I.
smart
I
player.
like this trio, and it's also interesting because of as we saw, as I wrote down the main part that I was focused on here, how Charlie fits into this group.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes. We have this trio. We have seen him work with the other guys, but they they really put an effort on this topic that I brought up a bit earlier, but similar to now of Charlie telling us about his love of Taylor Swift and him bonding with some of the girls over that. And he could easily be in this tribe, I'm almost seeing him as in the same spot as maybe Ty was in Korong.
Yeah, for sure. And I will say, I like all
Not
three
like
of these
just running
women.
off and I was gonna say maybe not like Ty with running off and climbing up trees and doing crazy stuff for an idol, but
Yeah, but hopefully that was entertaining. And yeah, Ty's great television. But
yes.
I do going back a little bit, like I really like Jen this episode. Like she seems smart, like she seems to know what she's doing strategically. And I forget where there's an example somewhere in my notes of her just having good game knowledge about something. But she also just seems super likable and like fun to play with and fun to be around if you're out there. So I'm not saying I
She
think
was
she'll win because
Kevin's
I'm still
winner pick.
hoping Venus, our winner pick, wins. But I see Jem going really deep into this game, especially after this first
Kevin's
episode.
winner pick. She was definitely in my probably if I ranked the cast of most to least likely to win, I would have put her in a number three.
Yeah, but and Maria too seems to be really smart, and we see her at Advantage Island just completely outsmart Jelinsky, which to be fair, I'm guessing that doesn't take a ton. But
Yeah.
so yeah, I love Siga so far. This tribe just seems so fun to be on. And Nami seems fun to be on also. Like both of those tribes, A plus so far. But there's a third tribe, and we're about to return to Yanyu again. So do you have anything else from Siga before we do that?
No.
Sorry. The first and we return to Yanu and we're seeing things from Kenzie's perspective to start and just kind of meeting her, getting to know her personality. And I wrote down, I love Kenzie so far, just as I predicted. Like she seems exactly what the cast reveal painted her to be, which is just
She'll be a
very
great character this season. She
yeah,
clearly that we're already seeing from her job has really strong social skills that'll work well in
yeah.
this game. And she seems to be bonding with everybody where she had that relationship with Jelinski, but just as easily she was able to vote against him and not put herself in the minority on day one.
Yep, and she's social. She gets along with everyone well. Like you said, she was able to vote out someone she had a bond with and not be afraid because she also has bonds with everyone else. And she just, like I said, she seems really fun and positive so far. So that's going to be a bit of fresh air whenever she's on TV. And the next scene is kind of interesting is we see Kenzie talking to Jess, and Jess says she's playing a really wanting to play a really slow game to start off with, which is already just a weird quote to me because even like I remember Winners at War when Ethan hadn't played since season 8 and he said this game is moving at a supersonic speed now.
Yeah.
Jess coming out here saying she wants to play a slow game was kind of interesting. But Kenzie says after that
And that's where I was
Jess
kind of
doesn't
worried
want to
about.
do what?
That's where I was kind of worried about Jess is like,
Yep.
does she watch this show? Is her mindset in the right spot to be a good player? Or does she have a friend that's a Survivor super fan who told her, hey, you'd be good, and she got on and now she's overwhelmed?
Yeah, and even after this interaction, we have a confessional where Kenzie says that Jess doesn't really want to talk strategy and no one can get a read on her. That's a bad look right off the bat. Like that's and it made her a target. She could have very well gone home here had Jelensky not been
Tonight's vote,
Jelensky
I
about
still don't
everything.
think she just survived tonight's vote because of what Jelinski did, quitting again. I
Hmm.
don't think that that makes it just because it was a unanimous vote in her favor that makes her in any better spot in the game. And I could see her going home the next time this group has to vote.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like she very well could have gone home had Jelensky not been so Jelensky about everything he did.
And now that Jelinski's gone, there's nothing to say that just because they were working with her that Bono and Q are gonna continue to want to keep Jess and vote out, say, Kenzie or Tiffany.
Yeah, and yeah, I don't know who would go next. I assume she goes next, but after that, I don't know because like Kenzie, Q, Bonu seem to all have good relationships with both as a trio and individually with everyone. So I don't know what happens with the three of and Tiffany too, all four of them.
Tiffany has something in her bag now that we haven't talked about yet.
She does. And do you want to do that now or get to it in later?
We'll get to it when it comes up, but it's going to be pretty soon.
Yeah. And so, as I mentioned, off the bat, this kind of group of four forms, and this group of four changes, and I have a note on that later. But Q, Kenzie, Tiff, and Jelensky decide they're going to be a four, and Kenzie says that her and Tiff have something on by themselves within the four. So that's something to watch
Smart.
for.
Boston Rob always says step one, get in an alliance. Step two, have an alliance within your alliance.
Yep, and
And
we
you have to do that in order to make sure that you have the votes moving forward. So I really like this play from both Tiffany and from Kinsey.
yeah. So do you have anything else from Yanu before we go back to the Orange Beach?
Just quickly, so I did laugh though with that beware advantage because if you remember the Entertainment Weekly article, Tiffany said, I don't know why everybody always talks about their advantage. Just shut your bleeping mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And now, what does she do the second she sees a beware advantage? Kinsey, look what I got.
That's amazing. I love that. And so we go back to Nami camp, and this is just a hilarious scene to me. Is Venus and Soda are talking, and Soda says, "Yeah, I was a camp counselor." And Venus goes, "Oh, you know all the camp songs and camp games." And Soda's like, "Yeah." And we get a confessional of Hunter who says, "Oh, I also used to work as a camp counselor." My least favorite part of that job was the camp songs.
I
And
love
then we
that.
cut back to Soda singing a camp song, which is just hysterical.
Yeah.
And that's also when we get the scene of them, like this tribe cheering and clapping everything, and Hunter calls them the Team Spirit tribe. So Siga is the Vibes tribe, Nami is the Spirit tribe, Yanu is dot dot dot. And what I wrote on my notes, and at the end of the
So we'll
episode, I
vote each
still don't
other
know
out,
who they
tribe.
are as a tribe. I don't know. Like Yanu, I need to see more from them. They kind of seem like a
Yeah.
mess so far, but and so we also see Hunter
I
and
mean,
Tevin
I'm
bonding over.
already noticing we'll see what production decides to do. They have some good groups, but it's like just with this format, it already shows the need for like maybe in episode 4 to have a tribe swap.
Yeah, maybe. And so we see Hunter and Tevin bond over their love of all things, the Andy Griffith show, and decide that they're the Andy Griffith Alliance, which made me smile because it made me think of my grandparents' house in Kentucky. Because when me and my parents would go visit them, Andy Griffith seems to be like always on at their house when we would take trips there, like at least once a day. Because 5 hour trip, we go over there for a week or days at a time, and Andy Griffith is on at least once a day for about an hour, probably. So that made me smile. So, do you have anything else from Nami so far before we switch beaches again? Gosh, we switched back and forth a lot this episode.
Yeah, we did. I mean, I like that. Good on production for letting us, especially with a 2 hour premiere and next week's 2 hours as well, giving us the chance to at least think that we kind of know people rather than trying to rush two tribals in. And if it's the same tribe like we got in, say, 41, that we don't even know, I don't even think it was the same tribe, but still, we don't even know who's who by the end of the episode. This was really well edited.
Yeah, you mentioned how it usually takes you a little while to learn tribe names. It usually takes me an episode or two, maybe three, to actually learn all the players' names and like remember who's who. So going back to Sega, I have written down here Ben is like the life of the party. We touched on that already. I don't know why I wrote it down here instead of with his montage earlier. Okay, here's what I was talking about though. I mentioned earlier that there was a scene I remembered writing down that Jem just had really good game awareness, and it's this: is that the girls want to form a girls' alliance, and Jem realizes that that would just force a 3-3 tie, and they need a fourth person to bring into their alliance. Really smart of her to realize that. It seems like common sense, but we've seen too much of Survivor to expect common sense from everyone that plays. So good
The
for her.
reference, I know I made the reference already, but it just reminded me of Anna approaching all of the guys in Korong to get one of them over because she was telling them on day one, me, Michelle, and Julia are not going to split. So either come or it's a tie.
Yeah, and then the swap ended up splitting them up anyway. So
Splitting them equally.
yeah, and so yeah, to me that just showed great smart and game knowledge by Jem there to realize they needed a fourth person and not just immediately jump on, oh yeah, Girls Alliance, let's do it. The girls decide they want to bring in Charlie, which to me seems like a smart choice. He seems pretty smart, seems likable. You and me both had him highly ranked when we were doing cast assessments and stuff. And then Charlie seems in with them, and we get a great confessional from him. I've only ever had women, I'm paraphrasing him, but he basically says he's only had women bosses in his jobs. So he has experience working with women, and he sees this alliance going well.
Wrote this down, but then I also wrote down like you, a student. How many bosses have you had?
I mean, he's a student, but you can have jobs outside of school
Oh
also,
yeah, absolutely.
even if it's like a fast food job or a grocery store job or something. But that was just a really smart. I don't know. I like that he said that that's where his mind went of. Oh yeah, I can do this. It won't be weird or anything that I'm the only guy in the alliance. These are people I can work with. And
For
so,
sure. And I mean, like, I've always really would identify with what he's saying there because I've had lots of female friends. I'm more into things like solo traveling where I've met people of both genders around the world. I'm someone who would much rather say go out for a bottle of wine than to drink beer. So
yeah.
I totally connect with that confessional.
Yeah, I would absolutely. And when the three women that want to you to align with them are Jem, Mariah, and Maria, well, those sound similar. I just realized that. Anyway, when it's those three that all seem like they know what they're doing, yeah, I'd absolutely jump in on that alliance. That seems like a really strong group there.
It does.
Right after this, though, we see Charlie back at camp, and Tim says to him, "Oh, the girls look like they're working together. Us guys need to get together and vote one of them out." And Ben is there. We don't really see him confirm or deny this, but I wrote down Charlie is in between two groups here that both want him to be a part of them. He's in a great spot. He's right in the middle.
Oh, he is. Uh, the interesting thing is, though, is that if he was to decide to vote with the two guys, then he needs to find one girl that he's closer to and get her to come over too.
And I don't think that's likely. I feel like he goes with the girls knowing that there are already three, he's a fourth. Whereas if
I
he
think
goes
so
with
as
the
well,
guys, he
but
has to try to flip one of the girls. It's a lot easier to just go with the girls. Would you agree with me on that?
we,
Do what?
no, I would agree.
Yeah. And the easiest decision isn't always the best decision because being the only guy in the alliance, there's a chance he's the bottom. But this early in the game, like I said, just make sure it's not you and figure the rest out later.
Yeah. I just want to go to one thing before we get into the journey.
Yeah.
I don't think that's coming up next, but going to um Orange.
Yeah. Is this the Venus stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole little scene here from Nami camp
I
right
mean,
before.
can I just say how many seasons do we have to listen to X is like Pavudi?
I have it written down in my notes here, and my screen's too bright for it to show up on YouTube, but here we go again with the Parvati 2.0 thing, and I have two little eye roll emojis.
I mean, Pavudi played for the first time when I was in grade 9. I've now been working a full time job for 6 years
Yeah,
since graduating from 2 degrees, and we're still comparing contestants to Pavudi on day one. This
yeah.
is getting ridiculous.
So this whole Nami camp sequence here is great. So Tevin says something to Venus about her being a princess, and her whole thing is, I didn't want to be a princess coming in. I don't want that target.
Yeah.
And she says in a confessional she feels like him just saying the word princess puts her at the bottom. So she goes looking for an idol, which at first I'm like, oh, I hope you find it. Go, good for you. And then I'm like, oh, you're gonna get caught. It's the first episode. What are you doing? Randon kind of catches her, either that or like she sees him and tries to cover it up. I'm not sure who saw who first, but Randon makes an interesting move here. He decides that she's a threat. He wants to paint her as a threat, and he runs to Soda to pitch Venus as this threat. And here's why. And in Soda's own words, her Sodar went off, which I love that word. That's great.
It's
And she
funny.
goes and tells Venus everything Brandon just said, and basically her quote is, "He's using your looks against you." And the whole and Venus takes the Parvati thing as a compliment, by the way, which is great. You don't always see that. Like she really kind of owns it. Like, yeah, Parvati did all this cool stuff. That's a great
You
compliment.
also don't often see it get back to the player when you look at someone like Molly in Island of the Idols.
Yeah. Or Chelsea and Island of the Idols too. But and like I get where Randon's coming from. You see someone in the woods searching for an idol on day whatever it is, one or two. Like, yeah, that's gonna raise some red flags. But he was, in my opinion, just a little bit too aggressively about it, and the way he pitched it to Soda was kind of over the top and put himself in hot water a little bit. And then to finish this off with my thoughts on it, great quote from Venus about all this. How dare you point the finger at me? Like, I mean, you're correct, but how dare you assume I'm doing something sneaky? Great quote there. You're right, but how dare you, basically. So I thought she was going to be in trouble for a few minutes there, but Soda kind of saved her, calmed me down a little bit. What are your thoughts on all this before we go to Advantage Island?
Basically, what I said. It's interesting just in this one that it did get to Soda and then it therefore got back to Venus. So we really see a duo forming in those two, which I like.
And I love that duo so far. Both of them on your fantasy tribe, unfortunately for me, by the way. I've wanted Venus, but
You know, somebody else is on my fantasy tribe, so you and Kevin are killing me right now.
yeah, by the way, before we forget to mention this, and Kevin listening to this might be the first time you're hearing this. I'm not sure. The way the fantasy tribes are going to be scored this year is for each placement the voted out player gets, that's how many points are assigned to that person. So Brett had
18
Gillespie.
points.
He gets 18 points tonight. Whoever
And
has
it
the
works like
lowest number
golf.
at the end
Lowest
of the
score
season wins.
wins.
Do what?
Yeah, I said it works like golf. You want the least amount of points, not the highest.
Yeah, the lowest amount of points at the end of the season wins, and that's probably going to be me. So here's where the episode gets interesting. A boat shows up to camp, and we don't have the ship wheel anymore, so can't call it Ship Wheel Island. I'm gonna call it Advantage Island. And the note says to each person, one person must get on the boat. You'll be back this afternoon. Jolinsky immediately volunteers for it, which this is another one like Sweat versus Savvy. I wouldn't want to go on the boat because it puts a target on you. Even if you come back
I
and are completely honest with your tribe, half of them are going to assume you're lying.
thought it was interesting that Banu said he wanted to go, but once Jelinski volunteered, he just gave it to him.
I actually wrote down here Jolinsky volunteers because he really wants to go, and in parentheses put that puts a big target on himself, once again volunteering for something. And then I have a little bullet point that says Banu says exactly what I just typed. And Tevin gets chosen for Nami, and Maria gets chosen for Siga. And
Yeah, got chosen through rock paper scissors, which was interesting.
yeah, and before we actually get to Advantage Island game itself, because it's different this season, and I actually really like it.
Yeah,
Jelinski says, "Oh, I think it's in a confessional even. Oh, confessional. He's not saying this to the other two people, I don't think. Man, I really just I didn't have to work my tribe at all to come here. Like he's just so nearsighted, thinking about a possible advantage. He can't. I feel like there's this inability to see the bigger picture with him because he's not realizing that volunteering that quickly to an island known to send people with advantages puts a target on you. And you
yeah,
already quit something earlier, and your tribe's already not happy about that. So,
yep.
okay, so let's get to the game itself here. We have a skull. The way it works is we have a skull card, a torch card, and a vote card. And each person picks up a card and looks at it. The person with the torch card reveals their card, and the other two people have to try to convince the torch person that they have the vote card. And the torch person has to try to guess who actually has it. And if they get it right, them and the vote card person get extra votes. If they get it wrong, they lose their vote. I like this. This is new. This is a new way of doing this island.
And I wrote down in one thing about this is kind of going back to the whole thing we were talking about with Charlie, but one thing that I wrote down in terms of actually deciding where you're going to go and how to put four people together out of six is I just made a short note that said this is the new era. There could be extra votes. There could be double lost votes. 3 votes might be enough. 4 votes might not be.
Yeah, that's true. But we've seen this island do so many different ways. We've seen it where they all three go separate ways and do their own thing individually. We saw it last season where they all had to decide as a group what they wanted, and Austin wanted a sandwich and did either Austin or Drew, one of the Reba guys, wanted a sandwich and didn't get it. And so I like this though. This game it's all three of them interacting with each other. It's not sending them all off on their own. But there's also a bit of strategy to it, to where you have to try to guess and figure out who's lying to you.
And
And
also, it's like a
so,
game. It's fun. I don't think anybody's going to hold it against each other.
yeah, well, Maria threatened to hold it against Gillespie, which was a great move. And so Maria pulls the torch card, and Tevin pulls the vote card. And of course, Jelensky pulls this. And I'm already thinking this at the time. The rest of the episode hasn't even happened yet. Of course, of all people, he pulls the skull card and has to try and lie.
Yeah.
And he tries to lie, and Tevin basically says the same thing he does, except when Tevin says it, it's true. And brilliant move by Maria here. She goes, Jelensky, if you're lying to me and you cost me my vote, I will tell the rest of my tribe you lied to me and they can't trust you.
Yeah, that is
And he
brilliant.
pulls. He goes, okay, I have the skull. He has the vote. Pick him. And oh my gosh, I don't understand. Like, you don't even try to figure get your. I don't know. Weird move by him to just give up there.
Once again.
Yeah, at least he didn't actually quit the game like two people did last season, though. So he's got that going for him.
Exactly.
And
All
so,
right, so we go back to camp, and I just want to focus a bit before we wrap up. I mean, we've already kind of hashed tribal out through the entire podcast, so well, if you have anything to add, by all means. But really, what I want to just focus on here before we look at the challenge and wrapping up is the BOR advantage.
yeah,
As
this was interesting.
I did talk about what Tiffany said in her interview, but it's interesting now we figured it out. But I really like this idea of she loses her vote until she loses a challenge, which merging into the challenge they lost. So we figure out what actually is going to happen right away. It's not something that we're sitting on for like 3 weeks. It could have been just as easily. It probably will be on the other tribes, but at the same time, it's like I really like this idea of she's at least isn't completely stuck. Once she loses the challenge, she has the chance to earn that vote rate back and get the advantage that comes along with it. In this case, an idol.
For sure. And I like this iteration of what they have to do of
Yeah,
decoding the message that tells you where the key is.
yeah.
And we've
I
seen
think
so many different.
production. I think production in this was clearly listening to the fan base that was just like, there's too many lost votes in here while still keeping the core like beware advantage that they've had in every new era season.
Yeah. I will say they can't go back to it because after the two times it was done, everyone's gonna know what they are. But I missed when the beware advantages were just the really weird off the wall things you had to say in front of everyone and work it into the conversation. Like that
Yeah.
was great. They can't do it again because everyone's immediately gonna know what the like why they're saying the crazy thing now. But that was great. I missed that.
It was great until at that time, Mike, the player I'm cheering for, has to insult the beautiful game on national television,
Yeah,
which I know might be more popular for the American audience than for me.
yeah, for sure. And so, real quick, because I did one of my notes here that I wanted to make sure I covered. I put, good lord, this challenge, like this immunity challenge. having to move this, and we've seen them have to move like a giant sandbag or something through an obstacle course before. But these geckos each tribe has 15 feet long, 500 pounds. Good Lord, Probst. Like, what are
Yeah.
you doing here?
I mean, thankfully he's doing it in the first challenge and not after they haven't had food for like 2 weeks. But
They wouldn't be able to move those things after 2 weeks. 500 pounds. Good Lord. Like, it's good television, but so heavy. I couldn't believe it.
yeah,
And then, so Nami wins immunity. Oh, by the way, Tiffany did successfully decode the message and find an idol. I don't remember if we said that or not. But Nami wins immunity. Siga wins second. What I wrote down is Jelensky has to be the one going here, right? But no, they decided originally they want to target Jess and tell her Jelensky is as a fake plan, which I get. I've always been a strong proponent of. In the pre-merge, you just have to avoid tribal council. Keep the people that are physically strong and will keep you away from tribal. And with Jess having the sleep issues she had, I could have seen that. But he's just been too big of a wild card. Like, he's the exception to that rule for me.
yeah, agreed.
And Q says Q is able to flip that vote. He talks to Banu, talks to Kenzie. And this is interesting. We talked about that four earlier that formed a Q, Jelensky, Tiffany, and Kenzie. And we see a scene here while Kenzie's braiding his hair, where Jelensky says, our four should stick together here. I think we can run things if we get far enough into the game. And he still thinks that's the four. And
Yeah,
shortly after that, we see Kenzie, Q, Tiffany, and Banu as the four that are deciding things. So at some point, Jelensky got replaced in the group of four and didn't even realize it. But yeah, we already talked about tribal, and Jelensky goes home. The thing I couldn't believe was Jelensky says, me and Q, we're the type of people that don't give up. And Jeff immediately goes, that's impossible. Q just told me you guys quit. And then later, Jelensky's trying to explain what happened at Advantage Island. And Q interrupts him to say, let me clarify. Jelensky gave his vote away here so that the other two people from the other tribes could have extra votes.
yeah.
Yikes. That's pretty aggressive, especially for the first tribal, and
Yes.
I loved it.
Oh, so did I. But and I see why he did it too. That like that's one way to see it. He also gained maybe some favor from people from the other tribes, but it's way too early to care about that.
Yeah. And the funny thing to me about this tribal was also just Jess wanting to make a very clear point that she was not in an alliance or on a boat or associated with Jelensky in any way at all.
Mm.
And so he does go home in a unanimous vote against him. And so that's the recap. But before we go into a line blindside first boot, to the audience, Brett and I decided that we're going to add something to our recaps this year. And we don't have a name for it yet. We're still thinking about it. But the concept of this segment is kind of like a power rankings, but there's 18 people in the game. So at least to start off with, we're just going to do the top of the list and the bottom. Maybe when numbers dwindle down, we'll do a full power rankings. I don't know. But so what this segment is going to,
It's gonna be who we think so far is in the best position and the worst position in the whole game.
yeah, basically, that's what I'm doing a long-winded, bad job of explaining. But moving into that, what do you think? Who's at the top of the rankings and the bottom of the rankings right now?
My rankings is Kevin, and there's a reason why I pick him in this spot.
Who?
It's hard to decide who's in, say, the best position after only one episode, as I'm sure you'd agree.
Who did you
So
say?
why I gave it to Tevin goes all
Oh,
the way
Kevin.
back to the first like minute of the episode. And that's that we get this long confessional that's the first confessional of the season with clips of all the players and we don't know who's giving it until the last 2 seconds. And Kevin Hugh got the first confessional of the season.
Yeah,
And how often do we see someone with the first confessional of the season go out early?
Tevin had a great episode. I loved that opening monologue from him explaining how what the
Yeah.
game is and what it means. Like you
And
said,
that's why I would put him in this spot is I'm like, they are not going to give us this opening monologue where he's basically giving his philosophy of Survivor only to send him out, I would say even pre-merge.
where I'm gonna go is, and I love your choice of Tevin. I'm gonna go to Siga, and I'm trying to think here because I want to say Charlie, just because, like we mentioned, he's got two groups wanting him. But
Yep.
at the same time, if he goes with the girls, I'm afraid that being the only guy in the alliance might put him at the bottom.
Mhm.
So I also want to say Jen because she was smart enough to realize they needed a fourth person, and neither of the other girls were. But I think I'm gonna go with my gut and say Charlie here. But
Good
like you
pick.
said, it's the first episode. It's really hard to tell who's in the best position of 18 people when we've seen 3 days worth of games so far. Now, it's not hard for me to tell who's in the worst position. And to me, that's
I think we're on the
unfortunately
same
Jess
page
off of
here. It's
my
Jess.
tribe. That's Jess, right? She's in the worst spot.
Yeah, no question. She's on the weakest tribe, and she could have easily gone home if Jelinski would have just played his cards better. So, I mean, I would be shocked if they lose the next challenge. I'd be shocked if she's still in this game.
Which I hate because she's on my tribe, and based off of the cast release stuff, I thought she had a really good chance to do really well. But again, the preseason stuff isn't always the most accurate judge of how someone's going to play. So,
That's true.
moving into a line blindside first boot, I have three names for you. And I haven't watched it a ton lately. I think I've probably only watched one episode or two since we recorded last, but I've been rewatching Co Wrong recently. So I have three names for you from my rewatch. And you'll see what I did
Not
really
watched
quick.
this season lately, but you know it's going to be names I'll be familiar with because it's one of my favorite seasons.
Yeah, and you're gonna get the theme here really quickly. You've got Nick. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but Nick from Co Wrong. His last name starts with an M. Joe Del Campo and Aubrey Bracco.
Okay. Um,
So it's Aubrey and the two people that voted for her on the jury.
yeah. I am going to align with Joe. I think he would be great to play with. Hopefully, he's learned his lesson about um, managing yourself and being proportionate in reward challenges and
Yeah.
not eating 4 feet of steak.
Yeah.
But really, he could have gone to the end of the game if he didn't do that. Who knows what would have happened? At the same time, he could have been voted out that night. So it's kind of a toss in the dark. I'm gonna blindside Aubrey. She'd be a great juror. She loves this game. The Victoria boot proved that she's not good enough at the game that she can be blindsided. And therefore, I'm gonna first boot Nick, who I always felt to be a little egotistical and full of himself, and probably not somebody that I would really vibe all too well with.
Yeah, for sure. I would agree with those picks. I might align with Aubrey just because I feel like she's a stronger player than Joe. I have a better chance of getting to the end with her, but I don't know because I would also kind of be afraid of losing a jury vote to her. I'm definitely first booting Nick, but I honestly don't know what to
Also,
do with the other two.
I don't know why I didn't say this, but just to like add into my aligning with Joe, it crossed my mind and just never came out my mouth to align with someone who has the career he has in the FBI would just be cool to live with.
You can align with Philip, also former federal agent. Gosh.
All right. So for mine, we talked about how we both like Banu so far, and he's on your team. I'm not gonna pick players from this season just yet because we don't know where they all fit in. But one of the big things that we saw with Banu this episode is, as I predicted, talked to his tribe mates about how he applied for survival right after becoming an American citizen.
Yep.
So I'm going to give you three names of survivor castaways that were not born in the United States.
Okay.
So your names are from Survivor Korong Tai, who was born in Vietnam, from Survivor um, Cook Islands, Cowboy, who I believe was also born in Vietnam, and from Survivor 41, Nasir, who was from Sri Lanka.
So if I align with Ty, do I also am I also aligning with Mark the chicken? Because that's a whole extra number that comes with Ty if I align with him there.
Technically, yes. I I'll hold off till my picks before I say what would happen.
I and see the chicken thing is always like the person that wants to save the chickens is kind of annoying to me, usually like Wendy on 38. But I loved Ty with Mark. That was amazing. I'm gonna align with him even if I don't get the extra voting number of the chicken, just because he's been proven to be someone that can get to the end, but someone that is beatable in front of a jury. Because the other two, like Michelle and Aubrey, both got all the jury votes. Ty didn't get any. And I feel like if it's a final two and Michelle isn't there, I feel like Aubrey beats Ty pretty easily. So he to me he's clearly the weakest of those three. If I can play a decent game, I can beat Ty at the end. I'm gonna first boot Cowboy, even though I love him. Not love. I really like him. He wasn't on long enough for me to say love, but you see him rub his original tribe, including Yule, who seems pretty easygoing, rub a lot of them the wrong way early on. And if I'm aligned with him, that could reflect badly on me also. So I'll first boot Cowboy and blindside Nasir because that's the only spot left.
Makes sense. I do, I guess, the opposite of you.
Huh.
I'm going to align with Cowboy in this situation.
Interesting.
I think he had his own philosophies of everything, but I would have loved to see him play far longer. I think Cowboy was maybe new to the game in a different way than the traditional, well respected approach of playing Survivor.
For sure.
And I'm going to blindside Nasir, as we've seen have him on the jury. I think Nasir would be very respectful of all games. And that leaves me to first boot Ty on the topic of Mark the Chicken so I can come back and have some dinner after Tribal Council.
That's fair. But see, if Mark the Chicken's impressive because he made it all the way to final tribal council and got no votes against him. So,
Knowing what's out there in the island of Kolong, I can guarantee you when Ty had to let him go, Mark the Chicken lasted about 10 minutes.
oh, not even that. It's just funny that it's funny to me that the rest of the tribe let Ty keep that chicken and didn't try to convince
Yeah,
him that they should all share it together and eat it for the greater good. It was, oh,
really.
Ty has a pet chicken. Cool. And he brought it to final tribal council, which is my favorite part of all of that.
Yeah.
And he gets his wings fluttering at one point
What?
because either Scott or Jason tells Mark to calm down. But this was a fun episode. Great premiere. Going to be an awesome season. Had a little bit of a scare. I thought my winner pick was in trouble, but Soda kind of calmed that down and showed us as an
He
audience that,
seems so strong that I'm not that worried about them.
yeah, well, yeah. And see, Nami's physically strong, and Siga's got the social bond. They seem to all get along really well. So Yanu's in trouble unless there's a swap coming soon. They're not Lulu, but they're not great either. All right, so subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Grab your torches and head back to camp. Bye, guys.